Good day to you again, friend. It's Willie James as usual. This time I'm still coming with the subject of the sealing and the shaking of the church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. A matter of fact, all of Christianity, if you want to put it like that. So, and I'm reading again the excerpts from the book, The Last Day Events. And bear with me as I read, and I hope you'll take these warnings seriously, friend. When the law of God is made void, and the church will be sifted by fiery trials, and a larger proportion than we now anticipate, will give heed to seducing spirit and doctrine of devils. Superficial believers will renounce the faith. I hope you will not be one of them, and by God's grace I will not be superficial. The work which the church has failed to do in a time of peace and prosperity, she will have to do in a terrible crisis, under most discouraging, forbidding circumstances. Friend, we got to get to work now. We got to do what we can now while we can. Talk to our families, our friends, our co-workers, distribute literature, invite people for Bible study, invite people to church, encourage people, talk to our people, make friends with them, our youth, our young people. Pass nobody by. Make friends with them. Not just about church, but how they can live their life right, and stay out of trouble. This is all a part of the Christian work and evangelism. Not just about telling people to come to church, but especially young people, telling them to stay away from things like tobacco, smoking, drinking, gambling, stealing, illicit sexual activity, anything that will endanger their health and their freedom. This is a part of evangelism. We need to encourage our young people to go to school, especially our black young kids. How important it is to get an education, to obey their parents, to stay in their parents' house until they are ready to take on the world, to get a profession, to be trained, properly trained, so that they can get a decent job and live a peaceful, normal life and contribute to society, instead of being a hindrance and like a scourge in the community in which they live. Okay, so let me continue. The warnings that worldly conformity has silenced, are withheld, must be given under the fiercest opposition from enemies of the faith. Right now, even in our church, there's so much smooth messages. Our pastor's not preaching the stern rebuke, thus saith the Lord, or thou shalt not. It's all about fancy. It's about style. It's about fashion. It's about pleasing people. It's not the fierce rebuke like when Nathan went to David and said, "Thou art the man," or when John the Baptist withstood the King Herod and said, "It's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." It's not like when Joshua said to Achan, "Why have you troubled Israel?" So we need to hear these things from the pulpit one more time, instead of these fancy, enjoyable things. We need things that will touch people spiritually and awaken some passion in them to say we need to live right. We're not just called to be church members. We're called to be disciples of Christ. We're called to be holy. We are called to righteousness, not just being a member of a church. All right, let me continue. And at that time, the superficial conservative class, whose influence has steadily retarded the progress of the work, will renounce the faith. Many amongst us now who hold position in the church and who are so firm on certain things like Pharisees will walk away when the straight testimony is coming forth, and they can't have their way anymore. If Satan sees that the Lord is blessing his people and preparing them to discern his delusions, he will work with his master power to bring in fanaticism on the one hand and cold formalism on the other. So we have to guard against both, that he may garner in a harvest of souls. Those who have privileges and opportunities to become intelligent in regard to the truth, and yet who continue to counterwork the work of God, would have accomplished will be purged out will be purged out. For God accepts the service of no man whose interest is divided. God accepts the service of no man whose interest is divided. Let me read that again for you. It says, those who have privileges and opportunities to become intelligent in regard to the truth and yet who continue to counterwork the work of God would have accomplished will be purged out. For God accepts the service of no man whose interest is divided. As trials thicken around us, both separation and unity will be seen in our ranks. Some who are now ready to take up weapons of warfare will in times of real peril make it manifest that they have not built upon the solid rock. They will yield to temptation. Those who have had great light and precious privileges but have not improved them will, under one pretext or another, go out from among us. The warning is solid, brethren. Seventh-day Adventists, the warning is solid. It's time to stop playing church. It's time to get serious and be real Christians in our private lives, in our homes, in our bedrooms. It must start in our homes, not at church. Everybody can be a Christian, a good Christian when they are in church, where everybody see them. The real Christian is when you're alone, when none of your brethren is watching, none of your family member, your spouse or your children, when you're in a strange place, when you're on vacation, when you're in your office, wherever you go. Christianity is not a part-time thing. So may God help us. May God help us to make it right, so that if we drop dead today, we are right with God. Angels will mark the spot, and when Jesus comes, we'll hear we'll be a part of the first resurrection, and we'll hear his voice saying, well done, thou good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of thy Lord. May God help us unto this end.